Hello and welcome to this video on why it is that you are not more scientific when brewing, or for that matter in most things. Now this video might sound silly. You might be thinking, of course you aren't scientific, brewing isn't a science. We would say, but no, you can make a case that brewing is in fact a form of science, chemistry and specifically biochemistry. Biochemistry being the science where you learn to perfectly draw a hexagon. Oh, and a bunch of stuff about living systems and similar work, but it is mostly how to get a perfect hexagon. However, unlike some forms of biochemistry, brewing is a little bit more liberal. It is a form of bucket chemistry. You literally throw together a bucket of ingredient or reagent A with a bucket of ingredient or reagent B. Much like other activities such as cooking and particularly baking, preserving meat for bacon, sausages, jerky, or even for cheese making. You're not combining a specific, very exact quantity of any given thing. You're just throwing a bunch of things together in a roughly correct ratio and getting what you want out of it. And this is why we describe it as an example of bucket chemistry. There is very limited need for accuracy, or in this case it'd be better to say minimal to practically non-existent need for accuracy. You aren't starting with specifically and very, very carefully measured ingredients. You have a general idea. For example, how bitter your hops are based on average alpha acid levels. You don't know exactly how much the alpha acids are in your current particular batch of hops. You just know that in general this particular variety has this amount. The same thing with your malted barley. That will then be turned into maltose eventually, and then yeast will take that maltose and ferment it to become part of the beer, contributing body and mouthfeel along with ethanol. But you don't quite know exactly how much maltose is present, you don't quite know the protein content, lipids, etc. So you don't have exact quantities. You can certainly get them, there's no denying that, but you don't know them generally speaking. In fact, we have recently encountered this in a somewhat different context that we should make a video about at some point, but in that case at least it was claimed that we were specifically talking about measuring ingredients to make perfume, rather than the broader application of scientific methods. The problem with that example is that they were dissolving the perfume molecules into ethanol, and therefore they were measuring it in grams at the time, or milligrams. And no, you weren't doing chemistry at the same time for the same reasons. In some ways it was like brewing. It varies. For example, in a recent reply mentioned, it varies based on factors like, for example, your reagents or ingredients availability. So, how do you have them available? Are they dry? Are they dissolved in a liquid? Are they liquid by themselves? So that's one problem already, and this is certainly true, and one way that brewing can be scientific. For example, when you're getting hops measured for content or similar, your grains for protein, saccharides, and more, these are typically quantified to some extent. Now, we can say this for large breweries. They do have the option of sending out samples, or possibly doing it in-house, to get them quantified so they know, hey, this season's batch of hops is slightly different from last season, or what we know as the average, so we need to amend the recipe just slightly in this way, that way, or the other way, in order to compensate for this particular variation. It gives them consistency in final product. However, in the example we encountered online, the poster was actually supplied with content dissolved or made into part of a solution with ethanol. In this case they say diluted, which raises some other issues we'll not get into during this video. What we do need to touch on is that if you have X percentage or X moles a milliliter or a liter of an ingredient, you have a certain concentration. But they aren't giving you X grams a liter unless they are trying to give you total dissolved weight, like say for example cleaning fluids. If you then need to react to these, you need to know how much. For a chemical, it's more of a poisoning safety issue and regulatory hurdles. And this is where we agree, you use volume but not so much mass. It's not impossible, it's just less common to mix a solid mass directly into another solid mass. You typically make a solution. This is your stock solution, or your, say, default or reference to solution. You go to that and you get your chemical, whatever it happens to be. For example, let's say you have for the sake of using a simple example, a 1 mole hydrochloric acid solution. This can then be diluted 1 to 10 and therefore you get 0.1 mole, and so on and so forth. This is generally how you're working in that case, because you prepare your solutions and then you use them based on that. And it's the reason why you need to know how much you have to start with, but after that you're working on the assumption that the solution is going to be uniform. If you're using a solid, then it's a little harder to do this, as you need to make sure the solid is completely dissolved, you don't have any particular reactions separating out molecules due to hydrolysis, and so on. With a solution also means that you can add X mils or freedom units and get the same result, as they should be practically interchangeable, at least that's the assumption. You assume that your, say for example, diluted stock of hydrochloric acid is going to be 0.1 mole if you dilute it 1 to 9, or 1 part to 9 parts, rather than being 1 part in 10 parts. Just for clarity, it means you get 1/10 the strength. And this is what you would do with brewing when, say, making beer.wort, for example. You start with mass, yes. Let's say we're starting with a weight of malt, or any other grains, adjuncts, etc. being used. However, malt is not just pure maltose. It is maltose, proteins, lipids, and more. How much of the grain is made up of saccharides and everything else is broadly assumed based on tested samples or a broad profile to the grain, adjunct, or whatever else is in use. For example, if you know historically this much grain has been used to produce this much final beer with this property, you just work on the idea that, hey, that's the amount you need to get this result. That also means you could be off by a fairly significant factor. That's both good and bad, as it introduces a small amount of variation, which for craft breweries is fine. For commercial breweries, this is why they get their samples tested. But it's also a variation that is mostly accepted, and why a gross weight is just what's done, and given in just about every recipe. This is the key point though. You are starting with a somewhat highly varied ingredient that doesn't necessarily have an exact, specific, pinpoint value associated with it. We can kind of compare this to brewing with just ethanol, a moonshine wash. With moonshine, you can get a practically perfect conversion of sugar into ethanol and carbon dioxide. In this case, you can use either an equation to figure out how much sugar into how much ethanol. We show you how to do that in the video on the top right. But for most brewing, you neither need nor want to do this. However, in theory, you can, just with a different method. That means you can check the completeness of fermentation based on just ethanol yield. For example, if you take specific gravity readings, you can figure out, hey, this is how much of the sugar has been converted into ethanol. Or you could use weight, for example, if you can measure the amount of CO2, something like that. But specific gravity is much simpler and much easier, and it's why it's typically used for things like beer. The specific gravity value is a proxy for the change in sugar content and concentration, and therefore the difference corresponds to a percentage or volume of alcohol produced. If you know that sugar gets converted at a ratio of 1 to 2, therefore every mole of sugar should produce 2 moles of alcohol and CO2, well, you basically go, okay, we know there's a 1 to 2, and therefore we know that if we've removed 1 whole mole, we have 2 whole moles of ethanol. It's a little more complicated, but let's just leave it at that for now. But by contrast with our earlier example, you don't know how much of your ingredient or reagent is present, and more so in diluting with ethanol, as you have issues to do with polarity, you have issues to do with the whole how much of it's actually soluble versus insoluble, and there's a whole bunch of variables. I'm not going to dig into that too deep right now. But it gets worse even more so when simply calling them molecules. You need to know either how much is present, and this is typically given in moles, as it tells you how much is present per unit, like a liter, which has important implications as described later. It also means you know if there will be a reaction and to what degree. This is important if you have reactions you need to know, particularly if there will be leftover reagents, or if you will only have the products. For example, with brewing, you don't have this happen. You have a rough idea of how much or what amount of reagents to add. You know from the style of beer being made how much will be used and what it will produce. Less in terms of chemistry what is made, but the effect, such as mouthfeel or a body in your beer. Beer being an example here. The residual sugars, which are the leftover reagents, and proteins will contribute to this sort of thing. The key being you don't know how much is left, and not scientifically, but you will have some idea experientially. That is to say, when you go to drink the beer, you'll know, hey, this feels kind of heavy for the beer style I wanted. Therefore, something's been done wrong here. Versus the other guy who says, hey, this feels too light for what I wanted to achieve. You understand by experience, not necessarily by actually measuring it, although you can do that. To some extent, this is also why in chemistry, and for that matter, a lot of actual scientific approaches to things, you don't use a dropper. At least, not exactly. This is the little glass tube with a squishy ball-like thing on the end to draw liquid up, and then, obviously, 1 drop at a time, put it back into something else. That is to say, they aren't used, but more likely, if you think they are, you're confusing a pipette and a dropper. The pipette looks very similar, long glass tube, The difference is that it should be graduated and marked, and you know exactly what's in it, and theoretically, if it's been done correctly, even with the squishy ball versions, you should be able to do exactly the same thing as with the plunger or press button version. The reason you don't do a dropper is because one drop can be different enough from the next to create a problem and be unpredictable. One drop is, well, what's a drop in one dropper might not be the same as from someone else. Also, you have issues to deal with the fact that, well, even in your own hand, you can get a lot of variation. So this is why you can't really say that that's doing anything scientifically, especially in terms like chemistry. This is also a problem that applies to how yeast ferments. Yeast leads to differences in various aromatic and flavor compounds being produced, not just in terms of the yeast itself, for example, differences between strains, but differences that can occur based on somewhat uncontrolled variables, like small fluctuations in heat or osmotic stress of the yeast, even if you're using exactly the same strain of yeast, because even if you're using what is supposed to be the same strain, you may find that there are minor, let's say, genetic variations between what is your particular, say, ale strain yeast versus what should be exactly the same yeast from somewhere else. Now, somewhere else could be as little away as, say, the next yeast packet, or it could be across the world in another brewery, for example, which is a key issue here. And this is another example of why it's more like bucket chemistry. You're not able to control for all variables, and you just accept that there will be some minor variations. And while so far we have focused on malt, we can apply the same idea to hops in particular, where hops don't necessarily have exactly X amount of an ingredient within them. They have an average of X amount. You also extract an approximately Y percentage of this, for example, from hops or from, say, when you're lattering your malt. That's because, well, you get an approximate result. You're never going to get exactly the same extraction of everything from every ingredient. That's just unrealistic. Again, it's because you don't know exactly how much is in there to start with, nor exactly how much you're getting out. You work on the idea of, hey, these are some assumptions we have to plug in to some extent. And this, of course, has just been focusing on beer, let alone examples using, say, local apples, where you have no known values. You don't know the amount of protein, you don't know the amount of pectin, you don't know the amount of sugars like fructose. You know almost nothing about it unless you go out to get it tested. Then you have a reference number for 1 year. Then you have grapes, where you can get an idea of sugar content from the grape, but that's about all you're going to get for the most part. Now again, you can send them off, get them tested, and you'll have an idea for 1 year. Honey with proteins and sugars, where, honestly speaking, given the huge variation year on year, you're probably not going to even be able to rely on 1 year's sampled data to extrapolate out to other years. Then you have koji and rice for sake, where you have, again, different kinds of koji mold that are used, and different kinds of rice that are used. The list could go on, and we're not going to beat this dead horse any more than we have at this point. It's enough to understand that everything you're doing in a lot of brewing is an approximation. Close enough is good enough. If it works for the government, it'll work for you. And more so when you worry less about exactly the right things going in at the right amount, at exactly the right temperature, and exactly the right time. More so if the final results come out of it are right. To use a rough comparison, a cake recipe. You add what is meant to be the right amount of flour, eggs, sugar, and milk. For example, you need, say, 500 grams of sugar, roughly a pound. You need, say, 4 eggs. Well, do you mean 4 regular eggs, 4 extra large eggs, 4 small eggs? There's a lot of variation there. And then sugar. Well, okay, do you just mean regular white sugar? Is the white sugar hygroscopic, as in it's absorbed water, therefore it's going to be heavier, and therefore, technically, if you use the right amount of weight, you have issues there. And of course, milk. Are you talking about light milk, full cream milk? See? But if you're going with any of these things, you should still get a cake that is more than less what you wanted. You haven't exactly measured the flour protein content, the egg lipids, or the density of the milk. If the time or heat is going to be off by, say, a few degrees or a minute, you should still get a cake that's pretty much exactly what you're after. Sure, it may not be perfect, for example, if you're trying to follow a recipe exactly or recreate a cake you've experienced somewhere else or by someone else, but you are going to get what you're after. Mostly. And the same is true, sort of true, of the outcome too. If you need a result that looks and tastes like your intended beer or other beverage, this is why beer judges need some training and certainly skills to identify the characteristics and then grade them when judging. And they aren't running your beer through a mass spec or HPLC to quantify that you got within an acceptable margin of the reference standard. they are simply going to choose to go, this tastes close enough, feels correct enough, and close enough, so yes, it is that beer, and grade it accordingly. All of this said, there are some examples of scientific brewing. This is also where we need to get into some of the weeds of brewing. But don't worry, we aren't going too far into the woods with this video, at least not this video. In this case, you can create something like a reference solution or artificial wort. That is, you take your individual ingredients as a reagent, and you can assemble a wort solution from this. For example, you might mix, say, a pure malt powder, or even just a pure malt mix. A malt as in it's just malt, it's not even malt extract, but pure malt. And combine that with pure water. That would be another sample again. And make sure it's, say RO water or reverse osmosis water. And then you might have an alpha acid solution that you're adding, something you've prepped yourself, or at least ordered in. This creates a simulacrum of wort. Obviously, it's missing out on a range of other factors, but let's simplify this for the example at hand. This can then be combined with your yeast irrelevance, and you can measure various outcomes. For example, you can measure the amount of CO2 produced, and obviously by that you get a proxy for ethanol production. You could just measure the specific gravity, and therefore the amount of sugars being used and various other things. There are a lot of things you can do with just this particular sort of artificial wort solution, and this is just one example, but understand there are other ways to either make or obtain reference samples for things like beer, so it's not as though you're stuck making your own every time, it's just an easy option. So this is why you aren't being scientific when you're brewing. You're after a close enough is good enough because everything you're using has an intrinsic margin of error built into it. There are going to be variations that you have no control over, so you have to add relatively large quantities, and because the quantities are so large, any of those small margins of error really don't have much effect on the end result. Sure, they can, but given the nature of what you're doing, you're already operating on something that isn't exactly precisely measured down to the minutest of margins. Rather, you're operating on something that's got basically the broad strokes of what's going on. Close enough is good enough, and that's why you're not being more scientific. You can be, but if you want to enjoy brewing, and you're not working in a laboratory or doing something related to industry, it's not really worth it. Although, at some point we should probably make a video on something like a reference wort or an artificial wort recipe. They're actually quite interesting. But for now, thank you for watching. If you found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. And please do post any comments, questions, or suggestions you have below.